With that, I would love to introduce Sam Marroquin. Sam submitted us an application to show here several years ago, and I think it was during the shutdown or right around that time. And so this has been a long time coming, and it was interesting when the works arrived to um, see the pieces that were in her submission. I felt like it was kind of like this, kind of getting reacquainted with her work. And it was really fun to hang it. So, Sam, would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself? And
Sure. I'm going to stand over here from my work.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It's a wonderful turnout. And I'd like to thank Roberta and everyone here at the Art Center who made this possible and helped put it together. It really came together, so thank you. In my work, I like to look at our current and historic events and really dig deep into them and uncover the truth about what is really going on. In our news and our media, we don't always really hear about what is actually going on. So in this series, I'm calling them dwellings, and so this show is named Dwell. I am taking the structure of a house and looking at it, and I can really put anything into that house that I want to. So I can look at all kinds of different issues. But I specifically chose the image of a house because it's such a basic structure. And for everyone, it really conjures different images. So it might make somebody think of a safe and secure place where they can go inside and be protected. And other people might have bad memories associated with the house. It just depends. But the house is kind of an iconic symbol, and everyone, I would say most Americans, can really recognize it right away just by glancing at it. They know what a house is. And even kids, from the first time that they start drawing, a house is 9 times out of 10 is the thing that they're going to draw when they pick up a crayon or a pencil. And so I really wanted to start looking at the image of a house. So for example, in these little paintings here, I'm looking at climate change. And here we have these images of melting icebergs floating around in the middle of the ocean. And just thinking about the climate catastrophe and how it is affecting the human habitat. These houses, this one is kind of looking at consumerism, and it's titled Never Enough. And so it's obviously this gigantic, lovely, big mansion with all kinds of things. I mean, they have flamingos in their yard, for goodness sakes, and a swimming pool. And I mean, I would love to move in, but when you think about it, like, how much do you really need? When there are people in the world who are starving and don't have roofs over their head, how much does one person really need? And then I also like to think about dwell in another sense, like when you are thinking about something, when you spend a lot of time thinking about a certain subject. So I dwell on these different topics that I look at and really spend some time with them and hope to explore them and tell the truth about them.
And Sam, to kind of follow on that, and Sam and I had talked about doing kind of a Q&A format, so it's not that I'm just asking all the questions. We'll open that up here in a sec. But thinking about just your process and how you accumulate the materials of your practice, in addition to which must contain a lot of consuming of news and consuming of information. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, my practice really does start with the information. So if I look at our news on almost a daily basis, I'm listening to the news. I'm really selective also about where I get my news sources. I seek out the sources that I know are reliable and trying to do their best to relay the facts and the truth about what's really going on. There's some news sources out there that are not really that reliable, and they omit and they pander. They kind of censor the information that they put out there. It's important to me to know the news source and who is telling the information. And also when you're reading books, I think it's also important to look at the history of it, to look at who the author is, where they come from, who they're representing. Those are all considerations. And so it takes a lot of time to digest all the information that I get and fully research it and to figure out what I want to say about these different issues.
And then how does that tie in with the materiality
Mhm.
of your work and the collecting? I mean, there are a lot of objects in these, the collage material. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a collection of things that I find when I'm walking along the street. I pick up little bits of rusty metal or, anything I find, bits of plastic, and I save them. And I have a big drawer. Actually, I have a couple of drawers of stuff that I've found. And so when I need something for my work, I can go to my collection and start laying things out and figuring out where these things go in the work. Then I also use a lot of the flat collage materials, so magazine pages. Like for example, in this interior, these are all clippings out of magazine pages, those interiors. And so I'm able to, I have several, I guess, boxes, you could say, of different magazines, different types of magazines that I can go through so that whenever I need a particular type of image, I can just flip through and find it.
Cool. And
I,
this is, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also use some images off of the internet. So it really depends on what I'm looking for. Like when you get a chance, you can come and look up close at these. But up here, there's an image of some young girls standing here together, and a girl sitting on a chair and some skeletons. Those were all images I also took from the internet and then did image transfers with them. I also save tags, as you can see, different tags and things, just everything, product packaging, anything that might make an interesting graphic or an interesting picture. And for me, by adding those little things into my work, it's kind of like adding in a little bit of our everyday life.
And then I have one quick comment, and then we'll open it up for other questions. I just wanted to say I was, often when we install the work, could be cardboard boxes to me because it's work at that point. But I was so moved by the pieces that you did referencing the shutdown, and it's interesting how it hasn't been that much time, but those images just kind of were so evocative, and I got really emotional hanging them. Can you talk about those just a little bit?
Absolutely. The three COVID pieces, which are right over there, they take a look at what it felt to be in the middle of the lockdown because of the pandemic and what it would have been like for the nurses and doctors in the hospital who were treating all these patients and dealing hands-on with the sickness that was confronting everyone. And it was kind of an emotional piece for me to work on too, because it was like going back through all of these different images and those experiences of when the lockdown first hit and everyone didn't know what was going on. We were trying to figure it out. They didn't even know what this virus was and how it was affecting people in the long term. And then the emotional response to it and all of the kids were at home and the no one could socialize or go to work, and it was kind of during that time I remember thinking about it that they always say in our communities we're so disconnected from each other these days. We spend too much time watching the internet and Facebook and all these other social media things and not enough time really socializing. But I feel like the pandemic really proved differently in how important our communities really are to us.
Awesome. What other questions do you have?
What did you use for your crow images?
Those are acrylic paint layered together with charcoal.
You drew the crows.
Yeah, it's multiple layers of the acrylic paint. And so put down the acrylic paint, let it dry, several layers of it, and then add in the other collage materials and more acrylic paint over it and let it dry. And then I drew into it with the charcoal and more layers of the acrylic paint, and then drew into it again. It was a laborious process.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And Sam will be here, so if you'd like a one-on-one. The other thing that she did and that we were really delighted about is she provided us with links. So a lot of the pieces, you'll see a QR code. If you haven't used one of those before, if you have an Android or an iPhone, you should be able to just open your camera, and you don't have to do anything, just point your camera at it. It will launch a little bar at the top that you can tap, and it'll take you to a blog post that Sam's put together that talks about that specific piece, which is very interesting. It shows some in-process shots and things. So please do that. And then there are some other QR codes on the pedestal here that are more general, that aren't specific to one piece, but are more about her practice and her studio work. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering because this is something that I think a lot of people in the creative fields grapple with. A lot of everyone who's here tonight are basically, very much behind a lot of the ideas and messages that you're putting forth here. And so a question that I often ask is how do you get this beyond the choir, so to speak, that you preach to? Legislators, Supreme Court, justices, all the like, to make impacts. And it's something I think any artist struggles with. So I just wanted to hear.
I think that's a very good question, because I do find that also a lot of times when I do shows or when I share my work, it is like I'm preaching to the choir. It's like everyone who sees it already agrees with my point of view. So it's I often think of my art as activism, but it's not in the same sense as somebody who is out there on a picket line or somebody who is writing and calling their senator and their representatives every day. And so I think that my art here serves as a reminder to people about these issues that are important that we need to pay attention to, and can maybe help give people that extra push to go out in their own communities and make a difference.
And Sam, I'll say that what I'm most interested in with this body of work is, because I don't think that it necessarily shows a particular point of view, it raises important questions. And because we're mindful of that. We don't want people to come in and feel, well, of course we want to feel uncomfortable sometimes, because that's a part of art. But we don't want to be unkind or judgmental or pushing a point of view. We want to ask questions. And I think that's what your work does. I think that anybody could come in and look at these works and have a really interesting conversation, not necessarily I agree with that or I don't agree with that. It's like that raises a question that I want to talk about. And that's what I think is really great about your work.
Thank you. Yeah, you make a good point. I think that I do like it to remain ambiguous enough that you could take a different point of view on it. And I do hope that they open up a discussion and hope the discussion goes out there beyond the gallery.
Sam, we visited a little bit about those four little pieces back there, the bicycles.
Yeah.
What's the deeper meaning behind them?
Those, unlike a lot of my work, those are just bicycles. But that being said, bicycles, as we all know, they're in a way, they're subversive on their own because, you don't have to buy gasoline to put into a bike and that, you're not supporting the, drill and fill economy.